Today's talk is entitled "It's Austerity for the Poor, the Corrupt Taxation System and Financial Slavery." So, how does all this fit together? What is the purpose of the austerity? So what I'm going to start with is the austerity for the poor. We have to have a look at what are the effects of this austerity to somewhat understand why is it being done, to get through the illusion of what's been created. So what we found is that a lot of food banks have seen a shocking rise in numbers. I think there were about 300,000 food parcels by this one food bank in, I think it was London. This has risen to nearly 1 million, or 915,000 food parcels in that year. So that's a massive increase in people who are reaching the poverty line. Obviously, there are other interesting statistics, which is, and we could say, right, well, these are the effects of these austerity, is that home ownership is the lowest in 25 years. So these people who struggled to buy a house now have to give up their house. And obviously the wealthy, the people, the mega rich, then can come and buy up these houses at knockdown prices. So their assets of the struggling to try and achieve something are now switched to the elitists who can afford to buy these up. So the money has gone from the poor to the rich, or somebody's bought them anyway. The other net effect of this is working poverty, which is now a sort of thing that is quoted, which is where people are basically, and these can be two people living on minimum wages, because the quality of jobs have been eroded, but other things they push down the prices of wages. And we have people who are below the poverty line who are working. So this austerity for the poor, I'm ashamed to say it, but it is working, because the assets of the majority are now decreasing. We have the growth of payday loan companies, and people are just trapped in debt. There are some ancient texts which talk about how it's a sin against God to charge interest. But you never hear anything about that. And some of these ancient scriptures have tremendous wisdom in it, if we could only get away from the dogma that surrounds them. The bankers would die a death if they realised, that usury was a sin against God and people accepted it. Anyway, so these payday loans are a problem for the poor. So we have to have a look at the austerity for the elites, because obviously there has to be an effect. If it was broadly over all the population, you'd say, oh yeah, great, that's fine. Everyone is suffering because there have been mistakes, genuine mistakes. But these are not mistakes. These are deliberately orchestrated. So black caviar is disappearing. I can't remember the last time I had wild caviar. But there we go. I think I've eaten some prawns eggs once or twice, but I think that's a little bit different. And they were the ones that I caught as well. So, but black caviar is disappearing. Therefore, caviar farms are popping up all over the world to fulfill the desire for black caviar. And obviously, this is the austerity of the rich. The sales of caviar are soaring while there's a waiting list for Rolls Royce. So the Luxury Society on their website have record sales for luxury brands in 2013. There's waiting lists for these. But these are the super elites now, because in turn of these luxury brands, there's a decline in light jets sales. So what has happened is that this austerity is affecting the multi-millionaire billionaire, but it's certainly not affecting the multi-billionaire, or I'll call them the control in the lead, the control of the monetary system and the control of the game. You probably never ever see them. You wouldn't even know who they were. You could suggest that they were Jewish bankers, but they would be nothing more than accusations. These super elites, you probably never see them. There would be a really good way to find them, but I'll suggest that later. But what has happened is, because the smaller jet sales are decreasing, the super jets are increasing. We've seen a rise in the pawnbrokers who are pawning works of art, Porsches. These are the multi-millionaire billionaires, maybe second-generation business owners, but they are people who work. They've worked for a living. The controlling elite manipulate for a living, and they control the game. They write the rules controlling the games. So what we have, and there are many indications, the ordinary yacht sales are down, but the yachts over 50 meters are increasing. So this austerity now is targeted the working wealthy as well, not the writers of the game. So there's a shortage of berths now to take these luxury super yachts, which are half the length of a rugby field or greater. So if you ever want to find any of these elitists, then go and find their berths. You can go and find them moored up, and you can ask who owns them. That's the only way that you'll ever find out who these people are running the game. So what is all this austerity about? Has it served its purpose? Well, yes, it has. Above the pyramid on the dollar is Latin, I think it is. It's an inscription anyway. And the purpose of this austerity is to flatten the base of the pyramid. So these are the working rich, these are the working poor, these are the people in poverty, but the whole of the base of the pyramid is being flattened and concentrated more and more money in the super rich. The translation of it, of the words above the All Seeing Eye, I knew it, Copiate, I think it Pitts or whatever, however you pronounce it, is he or she has approved these undertakings. And I find this very, very apt. The base of the pyramid is being flattened, and the elites are struggling. And I really do feel sorry for the elites, because there are things that they don't understand, but they're struggling to park their boats. They haven't got any parking spaces for their boats anymore. So what I want to do is talk about the corrupt taxation system, because people control this taxation and control the game. And this isn't strictly government, it's things above government. Government do what these people say. These are ancient scriptures now, the Tao Te Ching, written by Lao Tzu. You could call it a spiritual Buddhist, but I believe it's more an observation of humanity, and these are the kind of things we should be teaching in school. It was written, it's probably one of the older than any of the biblical scriptures, or at least dated older than the religious biblical scriptures. It was written in the 6th century BC, so that's 600 BC. what is written in chapter 75 is really apt for this video. There's three translations here of the Tao Te Ching. People suffer from famine because multitude of taxes consumed by their superiors. This is second, a different translation, just to give a broad view of what it. People hunger because their superiors consume too many taxes. Starvation of people comes when officials appropriate too much to themselves of the taxes they collect, or some things like that. 600 BC, before the rise of the Roman Empire, and we have Lao Tzu. You can call him a holy man if you want to, but a man who understands the nature of compassion. He talks about compassion. He talks about many things, and he also talks about taxation and selfishness of individuals who are corrupt. 600 BC. 2,500 years ago, nothing changes. Nothing changes. But it is going to change. This is an article from the fall of the Roman Empire, so the elite should really be aware of this, because this is where they're standing at the moment. They will suffer. Not only they won't be able to park their boats, but they will suffer because financial systems do certain things. So the failure of the Roman Empire, its financial system allows to raise significant taxes. This is the Roman Empire. Despite endemic corruption, which we see today, supported large regular armies with logistics and training. So that was the cause of the Roman Empire. Corruption, the elite is behaving, and obviously the overfunding of an army. Do we see that today? I don't know, maybe not. So, excessive government, these are other articles on the fall of the Roman Empire. So, successive government killed the ancient Roman Empire. And of course, let's say that this is what is occurring. So I wanna cover, this taxation. How successive governments and successive themes move through time. So we want to have a look. And I was in the Bristol slave on the docks, and it was the history of Bristol and its docking shipping background. And 500,000 slaves were moved on Bristol ships. A number of these ships had Jewish owners or Jewish names, or in the original shipping when slavery first started. And this is the trouble with whether it's Jewish or Christian. This supremacy of believing that you're a chosen race allows you then to deal in slaves. The Jewish moneylenders would find no problem in dealing with slaves because they're not part of the chosen race. And the Christians, I was reading a document from that's held in Longleat, I think it is, Lord Barr's place, and I mean, saying that these were not humans, they were savages, and they ate each other, and they, and there are some commentaries about that, none of that was substantiated. It's just a disregard for other souls, and this is how the elites behave, whether they're Jewish elites, Christian elites, Muslim elites. All the elites behave in this way. They are superior to the masses. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, who made the money out of this slavery? 2,008 enslaving voyages, so some of them have Jewish names, but they, so you'd have to have a look at the ship if you really wanted to get into it, and you're really going to struggle to find out who made the profit off this, who profited off this. The shipping companies would have made profits, but they would have been funded by these unseen people again, the ones who got these luxury yachts of the day. They would be sitting there either as shareholders or funders, providing money at a tremendous interest rate so that the slavery can go ahead and they'll take some of the profits as well. And in the Slavery Museum, or section that I was amazed at, the Joseph Way was one of the first ships, I think it was 1740. But over this time, the slaves aged. I mean, this may not be the total cause of the end of slavery, but this is a take on it. So as the slaves aged, they became less productive and they were worthless. So it's a bit like an old pair of shoes. Now, obviously these elites will say, well, how do we get rid of these unproductive slaves? I tell you what, let's abolish slavery. We've had the value out of them because all the slaves are in their 20s. It's a bit unpalatable as well. 40 years later, you're 60, they're not going to be as productive and they still eat as much. So they thought, we'll abolish slavery. And so compensation was paid. Now, you'd say, the abolishment of slavery and this £500,000 just from Bristol slaves, owners, was paid to Bristol slave owners. So hang on a moment. It's like they've used these shoes, because that's all they are, as a commodity to these elites. And then they get paid the full value for what they paid for the slave, and it's paid by the British taxpayer. Nothing was shown, no compassion was shown to these people who were taken off their land. They didn't give them money. They didn't give them money to go back home. Done on purpose. This is the way it is. The elites wouldn't have had it any other way. I want my money back from my slave, even though they're 90. And I don't want to feed them either. Because the end of slavery led to thousands of millions of blacks starving. Yeah, great, we don't have to feed them anymore because they're not productive. The commodity has been used. The result is as it should be. So the rich funders of these shipping have now taken their maximum profits out of it. The ship owners have taken their profits out of it. The slave owners who would have been the elitists have their money back. And the ones who aren't productive, they kick out in the street and starve. Great. And then the British taxpayer and all the other taxpayers all over the world so the masses pay for it. So it's a great con. It's a great con. So I want to talk a little bit about the financial slavery, this burden of us paying, back the elites for slaves has now gone into our national debt. It filters through over time. This is the corruption that the Romans talked about, or the Roman Empire fell from. And so I met the man who works on the rigs, and he was telling me that he works 2 weeks on, 3 weeks or 4 weeks off, and their standard of living is wonderful, and blah blah blah. And he said the Norwegian oil industry absolutely laughed with Britain because the way that they taxed oil. Norway taxed the oil companies so that they couldn't avoid corporation tax. They taxed every barrel of oil at a certain rate, and as they went along, they kept on taxing and taxing and taxing. Probably the Norwegian government cares a little bit more about its people than big business. Maybe, I'm not sure. But what happens in Britain is nothing more than, what we've seen in the slaves. The slaves who compensate the British taxpayer. The poor, let's call them the poor, pay for it. So the oil comes out of the ground, the oil industry and all these elites who sit on the boards and pull money from their shares, get the money out of the oil industry. There's nothing taxed by the British in relative terms to Norway, nothing taxed. And then the British taxpayer, the poor again, the majority of the poor, pay 60% taxation, or over 60% taxation, on the oil. So rather than taxing it from the oil company and then that spread over the world market, it's actually let the elites make the money and let the poor pay for it. The elites make the money on the shipping of dealing in the commodity of slaves. Good for business. And when the time comes when we decide either it's becoming distasteful and they're aging and they're not as productive as they could be, let's compensate these people for it. So we have the austerity working, and it's working very well. So nothing really changes. It doesn't change from the Roman Empire, it doesn't change from Lao Tzu. What we have is the mis-selling of the bank and the bank corruptions. Massive amounts of compensation are now being paid back. But what they want to do is they want to attack the bonuses, right? But these are the working bankers. These are the people now who have gone out to sell the double glazing products of the Bank of England. And the banks in England or Great Britain. These are the people who are actually working, who have mortgages to pay. Alright, there may be £2 or £3 million houses, but it doesn't alter the fact is the elites still don't get hit. The ones right up the top don't get hit. So what they're hitting is the jet owners rather than the luxury jet owners or the yacht owners, but not the basic yacht owners, not the super yacht owners, because the super yacht owners are now getting richer and richer. Our pyramid is getting crushed. And so, for this corrupt action, the British taxpayer has got to pay 500 billion. So we paid 500 million just for the Bristol slaves, which the people are now paying for, or still paying for, because then it's all loaned money back from certain elitists. $850 billion we bailed out the corrupt banks, but all the profit, like the shipping industry now, has been squeezed out from the top while it was being made. And of course, the British taxpayer has to pay for it. Nothing changes. But we've been sold into slavery, unfortunately. This is the nature of what corrupt governments and the fall of the Roman Empire was about. And so, nothing changes, I suppose. I mean, the tremendous work by Lao Tzu in 600 BC, over 2,500 years ago, tells us about this corruption. People hunger because their superiors consume too many taxes. Therefore they hunger. A scandal of 250,000 surviving on food handouts. The austerity has worked. It has reached its objective. There is nothing new under the sun, but there are lots of old things we don't know. And as the ages change, we will see something new. This is part of my research work. And the end of the Kali age will allow the meek to become the true rulers of the earth. There's no such thing as aliens, folks. The aliens are the elites because they lack humanity.